So this is actually neat. This is Mike and I's first time preaching together. Mike and I have been doing ministry. We've been friends for a long time, but we've been doing ministry for over 20 years together. In fact, you guys, when I was in high school, Mike was my high school leader. Can you believe that? That's why he has more grade than I have, but look how much I'm getting still. And even though we've never taught together, one thing we have done together, we got pretty close because we used to run the junior high Sunday school here together. It was Mike and it was me. So the Van Meters, me and my wife, the Hoffmans, we called it the Van Hoff-Meterman Show, and we would teach your guys' junior high. And I would always do something fun. I think you remember this. I know you remember this. When I would teach the junior hires, they'd have a pen and a pencil. They'd be writing down some of the stuff that I tell them to write down. And as I would call Mike up to replace me and I'd get off, I'd say, everybody, let's give it up for Mike. He'd start coming up and I'd say, if you have a pen or pencil, go ahead and throw it at him. And I'd run off stage. And all of these pens and pencils would fly up like Braveheart and like all of these arrows coming and just tatter you.
Yeah, it's a regular occurrence.
Those are good. Does anybody have any pens right now? Because we're going to do something right now. I'm just kidding.
You know, I don't know how many of you guys know Heather, Neil's wife, but she like makes up for everything that's messed up about Neil. She really is like sugar and spice and everything nice, and Neil's just regularly awful. And we were in Sunday school, and Neil was doing his shtick where he has everybody throw the pens at me, and I remember just being so mad at him, and we had all this candy they were giving the kids, and I remember I reached out and grabbed an atomic fireball, right? And they're like just a little bit smaller than a golf ball, the little hard ones. And Neil was in the back doing the sound, and he had his head down, and I thought, I'm just gonna pelt him. And so I reared back, and I just threw it as hard as I could straight at Neil. And it's like dead on, and I'm so excited. This is all happening in slow motion. And just then Neil bends down to like do something on the ground, and his wife is standing right behind him and hits her right square in the forehead. And she just grabs her forehead and drops down, and I felt so terrible.
Yeah.
So even when Neil's not trying to be bad, he's being bad. It's your fault.
I'll tell you this, ever since then, we've always liked Hannah more.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah. I like Hannah more.
Yeah, I know. We all do. Okay. Go ahead, take us on.
All right. Thank you. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about what we're going to preach our sermon on. Neil came off and said, I've got this great idea for a sermon. You know, that we're going to be meeting outside in September. And so what if we do something that has to do with being outsiders and how, you know, as Christians, we're outsiders. And I just thought, Neil, you are very creative. And when he said that, I started thinking about that movie from the 80s, The Outsiders. I don't remember how many of you guys remember this, like the 1984, The Outsiders. Weirdly, it happens, a remastered version has to be playing at Parkway Plaza in like 2 weeks. As I like looked up, it was crazy. But this movie's famous really for one main thing. It has like every young 80s star that would go on to be a big deal. And it really is remarkable how many people are in it. It's got Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Ralph Macchio, Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe. Like the list of the amount of people who are in this one single movie as these young stars is really phenomenal. Like the only 80 stars that are not in it is like Michael J. Fox and Alf. Neil, Alf was a TV show in the 80s with an alien.
Oh my gosh.
All right. The movie is actually, if you remember, the storyline, the plot goes along these two gangs. The Socias, who are like the inside kid, the kids who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, the preppies, they have nice cars, they have nice clothes, their life is all set up for them. And then on the other side is the greasers. These are the kids who are set up on that were born on the wrong side of the track. These are the kids who are rebels and outsiders. And the movie really centers on the greasers, and it really is kind of this picture that we have in our culture of the outsider or the rebel that plays part in so many of these other movies that we've experienced, where it centers around this person who doesn't conform to society, but they live life by their rules, and they're different than everyone else, set apart, and somehow they become the hero of the story. And so we have this kind of mythology about the outsider or the rebel. But, so often in life, those people, the outsider is just one more persona that people put on in order to try to become an insider. So often people are really, the reason they're dressing like that or acting like that or presenting themselves like that is because they really want to be accepted. As a junior high pastor, I've had a front row seat for this. I think that I should get like an honorary PhD in sociology for being a junior high pastor for over 20 years now, because every week I come and I get to witness this. And what's great about junior hires is that junior hires are just like adults. They're just not good at acting yet, right? So everything that they do is sort of like they don't know how to look cool doing it. They don't know how to like look like they're not doing it, right? And adults get good at pretending. And so, a kid will come, like this is a regular occurrence in junior high. He'll come and he'll have like shaved his head into like a pink mohawk, right? And this is not him just expressing his individualism. This is a desperate cry for attention, okay? And so you can tell this because he walks around junior high group and you can see it on his face. He's wanting to be noticed. And when people notice him, he feels like elated and joyous. And when people don't give him the kind of feedback, they say your hair looks weird or that's too, he like dies 1,000 deaths, right? And look, we all know what that feeling is because we've all been there. We all know what it is to desire to be accepted, to desire to be loved, to desire to sit at the cool table. All of us know that feeling that junior hire is just not good at hiding yet. The problem is, as Christians, is you come to the point we realize that God has called us to be outsiders. Not the kind of outsiders who are pretending to be outsiders so they can be received by the world, but actual outsiders that recognize that we're not ever going to be accepted by the world. We're not ever supposed to fit in with the world. Look what it says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers. Say aliens and strangers.
Aliens and strangers.
To abstain from fleshly lusts which wage war against the soul. The Bible pictures us as aliens and strangers, people who don't fit into this world, people who are not meant to fit in here. We have a different home, a different place where God has intended us to live. It says, therefore, abstain from fleshly lusts. Abstain from the stuff that the world is about. Abstain from all the worldly desires and ideologies and those things that wage war against our souls. Paul says it just as clear. He says it directly in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. He says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We're supposed to resist wanting to be insiders because God calls us not to conform to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds to live for Him, to adopt His view, to serve Him in this world. He's called us to be a people set apart for His own possession. And so He has us to come out and be distinct from the world. That's easier said than done. God has called every single Christian to be an outsider. But the truth is, in reality, many, many of us want to be insiders.
Yeah, there's a good illustration about this in the Bible when you look at the story of Abraham and Lot. Most of us know who Abraham is. Lot was Abraham's nephew. See, God called Abraham and He gave him a promise, and Lot heard the promise, maybe through Abraham, and he jumped on the promise. He wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to be there for it. He caught the vision. So God called Abraham to father a distinct people, God's covenant people, a people, like he said, set apart for God's own possession. And Lot decided he wanted to be a part of it. So both of them sold everything and left the land that they were living in, Ur. But the thing was, Lot was a little bit different than Abraham. See, both of them started off strong. Both of them had the same vision in it. Both of them were partners in this thing. But Lot had a problem. And we're going to read what his problem was. Their lives ended so differently. Abraham went on to be the father, the patriarch of the Jewish and Christian faith. And Lot ended his life dying in a cave in misery and disaster. I want to look right now, what was it that was paramount in their lives? What was it that caused them to go on two different trajectories? We're going to look at something in the book of Genesis 13:12, that shows us the heart of Lot and why he went in a different way than Abraham. This is right when Abraham and Lot, they had to move their camps. They were too close and their camps were getting so big that the land couldn't sustain them. And so Genesis 13:12 tells us where each one of them went. So let's go ahead and read that right now. Genesis 13:12 says, Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. Say, pitched his tent.
Pitched his tent.
That's going to be important in a second. I want to talk about that exact same thing. Now, why am I pulling this scripture? Because you have to understand something about Sodom. Sodom was the big cosmopolitan city. It was the city that if you wanted to go out for drinks and dancing, you went to Sodom. If you wanted to go see the newest movie, you went to Sodom. Get the hottest trends, Sodom. Know the new fashion, you went to Sodom. If you just wanted to go out and party, the place that you went was Sodom. It was the epicenter of amusements, of culture, of self-interest, and of compromise. And what do we see here? We see that Lot moved to the plains right before Sodom. Sodom was the world's insiders. And then what's worse, he pitched his tent towards Sodom. Every single morning, the first thing that Lot saw was Sodom. And every night before he went to bed, the last thing that he saw were the lights of Sodom, heard the music of Sodom, and was drawn in. He started to become enticed by Sodom. He started becoming double-minded. He started slowly desiring to be inside the walls of Sodom and no longer be an outsider. You know, it's a sad thing when people longingly look to the things of this world. It can be a dangerous thing when Christians become insiders. You know, like Mike's already said, it feels good to be an insider, doesn't it? To feel accepted, to be a part of something. It feels good, and it causes a lot of us to start moving away from being outsiders and start flirting with the world. You know, it's not just people that do this. It's entire organizations, it's entire churches, it's even denominations that want to fit in with the world standards, the social norms of the moment, that people and churches and denominations have even changed their values to fit that of the culture. Can I tell you guys something right now? This is important to hear. God is not swayed by the culture's ideas. You guys know that? God is not swayed or moved by the values and thoughts and beliefs of the culture. He is immovable. Amen? Listen, the word of God does not change. It cannot change. You can ignore it. You can reject it. You can deny it, but you cannot change it. It lasts forever. The only thing that we can change is us. And Lot started to change him. You know, it's sad because many people are like Lot today. We've been enticed by the things of the world. We have started flirting with the things of the world, the entertainment, the social platforms, the ideology of the world, and it comes at a cost. See, Lot eventually moved into Sodom. He moved all the way into the city. And it came at a great cost for him. See, as Sodom was being destroyed, he lost his wealth. He lost his wife. He lost his son-in-laws. And in the end, we find him living in a cave, and misery and turmoil continued in that cave. But Abraham was different. Abraham embraced something. He embraced the fact that he was an outsider. Say outsider. He embraced the fact that he was an outsider. He was different than the rest of the world. He had the call of God on his life to start a different people, a covenantal God people, a people that were set apart. He saw that all the world was over here, but he was over here, and he was prepared to live different. He moved to the plains of Canaan, away from Sodom, not like Lot, closer to Sodom. You know, we all have to make a choice. We all have to make a choice. Where are we going to pitch our tents? Where are we going to point our tents? You know, it's hard to know where we already have, because as people, we're really bad at self-evaluating ourselves. Isn't that the truth? We're great at judging other people, aren't we? But when it comes to self-evaluation, it's kind of hard. So Mike and I came up with a test. Can we give you guys a test? It's not a trick test. This is a test to kind of find out where you feel like you lie in regards to being an outsider or an insider, or find out if you've pitched your tent towards Sodom or if you've been flirting with the world. So I am going to make a statement, and you just have to internalize where you're at. You might be an outsider if you know that marriage was made between one man and one woman. You guys, can you believe that that is something that the world doesn't believe anymore? If you believe it's between one man and one woman, you find yourself as an outsider.
You might be an outsider if you believe that gender is given by God and not something that you get to choose. Look, this is the most basic biological fact that God has given us, and yet today it is totally up for grabs, and it's an incredibly offensive thing to say, but it's the reality.
Yeah. You might be an outsider if you believe the church is more essential than liquor stores and strip clubs. Come on, somebody. Do you guys feel that? Last year, we found out that our own state governor cares and thinks that strip clubs and liquor stores are more essential to your life than the church. God gave the church because of strip clubs and liquor stores. You know what I mean? And listen, I just want to reiterate, Tuesday, we got to vote a man inside of our governor position who cares for the church.
You might be pitching your tent towards Sodom if you think that the biggest issue in regards to abortion is my body, my choice, more than the killing of an innocent baby. You know, in the last, since 1974, when Roe v. Wade was put into place, we have aborted over 60 million babies in this country. Okay, there is not a human rights issue that is more grotesque, that is more disgusting than the abortion issue. And I just want to remind you guys that Tuesday night, we have a concert here in order to actually do something about it and help raise enough money to buy that sonogram machine. So I encourage you guys to please come out.
Yep. All right, I got another one for you guys. You might be pitching your tent towards Sodom if you think that God doesn't care about out-of-wedlock sex as much as your pastor say he does. That one was mean, Neil. Listen, I want to tell you this story real quick. We have this great Christian girl at this church, and she tried online dating. And she met this great Christian guy talking about his church and even saying like, yeah, like my pastors come and get my advice, which I think was hilarious, first off, all right? And they were talking for like 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they're getting to the point where they're actually going to go meet. And then the guy says something, this great Christian guy, he says, hey, I just want you to know I'm not waiting. And she's like, not waiting for what? And he's like, oh, I'm not waiting until I'm married. And this great Christian girl who is an outsider says, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that because I'm not interested in you anymore. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I get what kind of Christian you are, and I'll stop. And then he got mad. He's like, what? You wasted 2 weeks of my time. And she's like, no, sir, you wasted 2 weeks of mine, because she was an outsider.
You might be an outsider if you believe that God and not the culture is the one who defines right and wrong. Look, every day we have just bombarded with all kinds of value judgments of what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And the culture has all these things that they value. But the reality is God is the only one who has the authority to set what is true right and what is true wrong, what is true good, what is true evil.
Right. You might be an outsider if you prioritize being in church on Sunday more than going to the desert every weekend, the beach every weekend, the fill in the blank every weekend.
You might be flirting with the world if when you go to buy a new bathing suit, ladies, I'm going to stop, as I know that if I say anything else, I'm going to be in trouble. I will just say this, that if you've been to the beach anytime recently, what is passing for a fashionable bathing suit is really, really, really atrocious. And so when you go to the store to pick out what you're going to buy, if your question is what looks cute and what's going to look good on the beach versus God, how would you have me honor you in the way that I dress and the way that I present myself, then you might be an insider.
Yeah. If you guys have ever seen Mike at the beach, he's an insider. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're welcome. I am very modest.
Okay. I don't know how you answer those questions, but there's so many more you can ask. But even in those questions that we ask, we all really do know how God would answer those questions. He has called all of us to be outsiders, and we have to realize that and live in that fact. We're gonna spend the rest of the message talking about 3 fundamentals to being an outsider, and I'm gonna take the first point. Mike's gonna take the next 2. So the first point, the first fundamental to being an outsider is you must embrace being outside. Listen, as an outsider, we're gonna find ourselves either insiders or outsiders. There's really nothing in the middle. We can flirt with it, but eventually we start moving forward. If you do not embrace being an outsider, the natural tendency for a human being is to go inside, to be accepted and say and do what you have to do to fit in. After the Holocaust, some social scientists were haunted by the question of why were people so prepared, whether by active participation or silent consent, to go along with a regime that was committing such atrocities to humanity. And so they did this test. The test is interesting. It tells a lot about us. They got all of these different groups of people together, and they told them they want to just ask some simple cognitive questions. So the questions were this. They had 2 cards. They had 1 card with 1 line on it and another card with 3 lines on it of different lengths. And they were asking the question, which of these 3 lines was the same length as this line? And they weren't even close. It was very obvious. But what happened is they would grab the people together and they would brief everyone inside of a group except for 1 person. And they would brief them. They would tell them, all of you guys, pick the right length line for the first number of questions. And after that, all of you guys unanimously start picking the wrong one. And in many of those tests, many of the participants that didn't know what was going on started picking the wrong line because everyone else was doing it. They would pick what they knew to be untrue and wrong because they had such a desire to fit in. They embraced fitting in. They embraced being an insider. They embraced feeling accepted. It's the power of compromise. Listen, we have to embrace the fact that we are outsiders. Otherwise, we will continue moving to be more insiders. I want to read something that Jesus said. He says this in John 15, 18 through 19. He says, if the world hates you, you know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world, if you were on the inside, the world would love its own. But because you are not of this world, say not of this world.
Not of this world.
But I chose you out of the world. Because of this, the world hates you. God has called us to live outside of this world. And that means that the world and us are going to have confrontation in the way that we think. You know, I listen to news and politics and entertainers, and I hear what they say, and my mind goes tilt. You guys ever listen to what people say and their reasoning, and your mind just tilts? You don't understand how they're coming to these conclusions. You know, just a little bit ago, I heard this lady, she has 2 kids, and she's talking on the news, and she says how Cardi B, this rap artist, this woman, would be such a good role model for her daughters. Now, I wanted to put a picture of Cardi B up or even a quote from her, but the profanity and vulgarity that comes out of this woman is off the charts, and I couldn't even put it up. And in that same breath, as she says that Cardi B is such a great role model for her daughters, she starts demonizing Candace Owen. I don't understand how the world works, but I'm reminded this when I hear their thought process. I'm not of the world. I don't think like them. I don't understand like them. I don't talk like them, nor do I enjoy the same things that they enjoy. I am different. I have embraced the fact that I am an outsider, outside of their influence. Look, are you going to embrace this? I've embraced the fact that I cannot be swayed by their own thoughts because I've embraced the fact that I have been bought by God and I am an outsider.
Amen.
And remembering that fact gives me power to go against the flow. You know, Joshua took this same stand. at the end of Joshua. They're done with that first conquest, and they basically have essential control over Canaan. But there's still these cities in Canaan that the Canaanites live at. They haven't taken over everything yet. And in those cities, the Canaanites still had their idol worship and their sensual enticements. And Joshua knew something. He knew that Israel was faced with a choice that was going to define their destiny. That they had to make a choice. That if they wanted to stay uncorrupted, they needed to embrace the fact that they were outsiders. And he gets all of Israel together and he says this to them. We're going to read in a second. But I want you to know that we're at the same point in time. That we're faced with a choice that is going to define our destiny. If we want to stay uncorrupted to the world, then we need to embrace the fact that we're outsiders and follow what Joshua says. Joshua 24:15, he says this. He says, if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served, which are beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Amen. That's a powerful thing that he says. You know, it feels like the world is getting more wicked or farther away from God. You know, you look at our public schools and they're training grounds for depravity, and our colleges are playgrounds for anti-God thought. And the world has rejected the idea of absolute truth and absolute morals. We need to be people inside of this world that has said, but as for me and my house, we will be outsiders. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I'm reminded of my son, Trey. My son, he was 3 at the time. He's now 4, so we have to call him Quattro. It's life. And I'm just kidding. My son, Trey, we're at the dining table. Everybody's done eating except for Trey because he eats slow. And I'm in the kitchen doing dishes because I'm a good husband. Tell my wife that later. And my wife is sitting with Trey just trying to get him to finish the food. And my son is just dazed. He's just daydreaming about something, and he's slamming his cup on the dining table. Wham, wham, like he's a judge with a gavel. Wham, wham. And I don't know what he's thinking in the moment. And this is one of my good kids, okay? This that makes me think I'm a bad kid. He's like my most obedient kid I've ever had. He's so great. So this is so out of character for him. He's slamming the table, and my wife says, "Trey, stop." And he holds his cup up. She's like, "Do not slam your cup again." And my wife says he just slowly looks at her. He hasn't broken out of the trance of whatever he's doing, and his eyes meet her eyes. And he slams the cup and he says, "Boss baby." He essentially said, "Wham, I don't work for you." Which he's not completely untrue, because I think that basically all of us work for the 3-year-olds in our lives, okay, just to be real. Now, even though I don't condone that he did that, he got in trouble for it, I do wish that we as Christians were a little bit more like that. You know, as the world is trying to put its rules on us and its values, trying to shove its values down our throats, or its beliefs down our throats, or its ideas down our throats, I wish we were a little bit better like my son, with all that tenacity to just look at the world right in the eyes, slam our cups down and say, "I don't work for you." You know, my wife and I, we have embraced the fact that we are outsiders. Mike and Hannah have embraced the fact that they are different, a little too different. When you embrace that fact, it makes your decision-making process easier because you've already decided. Look, until you embrace the fact that you are different, you can't move forward in God's plan for your life.
Okay, the first point is you have to embrace being an outsider. You have to own it. The second point is outsiders need to stick together. Look, God has called us to be outsiders, but he hasn't called us to be alone. We're designed to walk out our faith and serve God together in his church. God has given us the church as a blessing to us to bind together his people into one group, one community, all living together as outsiders. Hebrews 10:24 and 25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The church is God's gift to us to encourage us, to strengthen us, to be a source of God's mercy and his love towards us, to spur us on to good deeds, to comfort us in hard times, to rejoice with us in our victories, to teach us and hold us accountable to be faithful to God. It's God's gift to us, but it comes with a condition. It's actually reciprocal. If you look at that verse, it says that we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. And then it says later on, it says, but encouraging one another. What that means is that at certain points of your life, God is going to use the church to love you, to bless you, to walk with you, to strengthen you, to help you. The reciprocal part, though, is that he's going to use you in the lives of other Christians to love them, to encourage them, to strengthen them, to teach them, and to help them. Look, the reality is this. I am the person I am today because of the investment of people in this church. There are so many people in this church who have taken time out of their lives, that have used their giftings and the things that God has given them to help me, to love me, to serve me, to hold me accountable, to challenge me. And the reality is, no,
Thank you. You're welcome.
not you.
I feel the love.
Not you. Never you. The reality is that you really messed up my train of thought. No, here's the reality. I'll never be able to pay those people back. Okay? I'll never be able to give them what they've given to me. But what I can do is I can honor them and I can honor God by passing that on to other people. I can take their investment they've made in me and begin to serve and pour out and give it to other people. That's how God's designed the church to work. The problem happens, though, that so many people tend to think of the church as sort of like a side dish, as sort of optional. They think, it's not that big of a deal for church. And so for me to be involved in church, I was thinking about how often it is that we say things like, it's been a long week. I just want to relax. I just want to stay home and relax. And I don't think it's important for me to go to church or go to that Bible study or, that I don't know really how much I'm getting out of that group. And we tend to be asking this question, what do I get out of it? What's in it for me? And I want to say there's a whole other half of that question that almost we rarely ask, which is, what do I have to give? It's not about what you get. It's about what you get to give. God has given you, every single person here tonight, He's given you giftings. He's given you resources. He's given you strengths and things that he wants you to do. And they're intended to give away to other people in the body of Christ. And so when you don't show up, what actually happens is we don't receive the gift that God has given you to give us. That's what's so important about being involved in church. I got an email this week from a woman who is thinking about getting her daughters involved in the youth ministry. And she was trying to feel me out by trying to find out where do we stand on these certain issues. Because her daughters are really struggling. And one of her daughters, she said, almost every single girl in her friend group has taken on some kind of other identity or some kind of other gender pronoun. And she said they're really struggling. So she's looking for a good Bible-believing church to get her daughters involved in. And I told her what we believe and what our stances are. And she wrote me back and she said this. She said, we have not been consistent in our church life in several years. After our home church became more mainstream, after they began to compromise. Finding a new home is something I regret not prioritizing sooner. Here's her story. Here's the situation. A woman came up to me after service last night. She said, I'm that woman. I said, And she said, I'm just like that woman. We left our church because they were going to compromise on the Bible and they were sliding into this kind of liberal theology and we just have never really made it a priority to find another place. You hear this woman is, which is good. It takes some courage to leave your church if they're being a compromise. But you have to take the more important step, which is let me find a group of Bible-believing Christians and become a part of them and fellowship with them. And this woman now, her daughters are struggling. Her family is struggling because they don't have the body of Christ coming together and standing with them. The reality is this, is that every single time you compromise, we become a little bit weaker. But the opposite is also true. Every time you stand firm, we all become a little bit stronger. We need each other. It reminds me of the story in the Old Testament of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These guys were literally outsiders. They had been led off to live in Babylon. They were godly men, and the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, he decided one day to build a gold statue of himself. And he made a law. He said, when the music plays, every time the music plays, I want every citizen in this city to bow down and to worship the idol. And if you don't, you're going to be cast into the furnace and burned alive. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're presented with a problem. They have as their first commandment from God, you shall worship no other gods. Their second commandment is you shall have no graven images. You shall not bow down to any graven images. And here they have a tyrant king who is forcing them under pain of torture and death to bow down and worship them. So they have a choice. Compromise with the world or compromise on God. And so they don't. Everybody, the music plays, everybody bows down except these three are standing straight up in front of everybody. Can't miss it. And so they get led before the king. The king says, I'm going to give you one more chance. And here's what they say. I love what their response to this. They don't need another chance. They say, O Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel 13, 16, 18, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. And this is my favorite verse. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. We're not bending the knee. We're not going to compromise. You know, I've often wondered what it would have been like if it wasn't the three of them, it was just one of them that day. Would they have had the strength to stand firm? Would they have had the confidence and the courage to defy the king? We'll never know, but I guarantee you that the three of those guys spent the rest of their life thanking God that they had their brothers there that day to help them to stand firm. God has called us to be outsiders, but not to be alone. Christians need to stick together. That's the second point. The third point this evening, the third fundamental of being an outsider is that today's outsiders are tomorrow's insiders. To help me illustrate this point, I just want to show you a quick video. It's a great video. It's based on this thing called the marshmallow test. It was a test designed by psychologists, started in the 60s. There's been lots of iterations of it. What they do is they bring a kid between 3 years old and 6 years old into a room, and they put a marshmallow in front of them. And they say, I'm going to go out of the room. I got to go take care of some things. You can eat this marshmallow, but if you don't eat it, when I come back, I'll give you 2 marshmallows, okay? Very basic. It's trying to measure kids' ability to delay gratification, okay? And so the idea is, and they went on to follow these kids and figure out how it affects you later on in life. But I want to just go ahead and watch this video. It's really great. I wish I could show you the whole thing, but I only have a minute.
Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay.
I love that last girl was like, it's not a question for me. I'm eating the marshmallow. We all kind of understand that feeling of struggling with delayed gratification, right? Like, we all know that 2 marshmallows is far superior to 1 marshmallow, but when you have that 1 marshmallow right there in front of you, it can be a tough choice. Well, look, some people treat their spiritual lives very similar to the way these kids are playing with this marshmallow. In fact, God has promised us such a great reward in the next life. God says that no matter what you give up for Him, no matter what you're faced with in this life, no matter what you have to surrender in following God, you are going to be rewarded many times over in the next life. You're going to have eternity to enjoy God's blessing and His favor if you just maintain faithfulness to Him. And so we have this knowledge that a good gift is coming. And yet, so many of us with the world, we're kind of like those kids, just kind of nibbling or smelling or just touching it to our lips or licking it or just taking little nibbles all over the place. But God says this life is transitory, short, just a vapor. Here 1 minute, gone the next. The next life, though, is eternal, permanent. It's glorious. No eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor has entered in the hearts of men the things which God has prepared for us. He gives us this promise of such an amazing gift. You know, so many of the things that the desires that tempt us into embracing the world. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want to be safe. We want to be respected. We want to be seen. All of those desires, God intends for us to be fulfilled in Him. He desires to fulfill those desires in us. But today's outsiders are going to end up being tomorrow's insiders. When we're welcomed into our true home, when we return to our true country, we won't be outsiders anymore. Jesus is going to welcome us in. He's going to invite us to sit down at His Father's banqueting table. And we're going to dine with Him as sons and daughters, as heirs of the kingdom. We should live this life in the light of that day. We should live our lives right now in the light of eternity, that we are meant to dwell with Him forever, that this is not our home. And we should spend this life preparing ourselves for the next life. Jim Elliot, the missionary who was martyred, said this so succinctly. He said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he can never lose." That's the proposition that God presents us with. And look, you know what makes the next life so great? You know what makes it the kind of place that after a trillion years, you're not going to start to get bored. It's not going to become old. It's not God's endless creativity that can create new things and new experiences for you. I'm sure that's going to be part of it, but that's not ultimately what makes heaven heaven. What makes heaven heaven is that Jesus is there. Right. And look, here's the reality. So many people that are even listening to my voice right now, so many people here in this world, they don't understand the treasure that Jesus is. They don't understand that He is the pearl of great price. That gaining Him is worth losing everything. He's the source of pure joy, of real peace, of true safety, of lasting satisfaction, of real love. It's Jesus. And I want to tell you, we don't have to wait till heaven to experience it. We can begin experiencing it right here in this life. Yeah. I want to invite the band up here. I want to read one last verse. It's in Hebrews chapter 13. The book of Hebrews has 13 chapters in it. This is the last chapter. If you're familiar with the structure of Hebrews, we went through it in our devotionals earlier in the year. But the structure of Hebrews is this. Is the writer's writing showing all the ways that Jesus and the new covenant are superior to anything that the Jews understood in the Old Testament. He's saying this is why Jesus is greater than all of it. And he's been laying out this argument for 12 chapters. And now here we are on the final chapter. Now, the problem he's trying to help them overcome is the people he's writing to, they recognize that to accept Jesus is to be rejected by the insiders. There is no way that they're going to be able to have Jesus and not be rejected by everyone else in their families and their friends. And it's going to cost them everything to receive Jesus. And he really summarizes his whole argument in this verse. Hebrews chapter 13, starting in verse 12, it says, "Therefore, Jesus also, that He might sanctify the people through His own blood, suffered outside the gate." Say outside.
Outside.
"Therefore, let us go out to Him outside the camp, bearing His reproach. For we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come." Here's what he says. He says, Jesus, who spent his entire life as an outsider, when it came time for him to be crucified, They didn't even deem him worthy to be crucified in the city. They took him, they made him drag his cross outside the city gate and be crucified out there. And then he says, therefore, let us go outside to where Jesus is and to be with him. Look, you can be an insider. You can be received by them, respected by them, loved by them. But what you can't have as an insider is you can't have Jesus. Jesus is outside the camp. We were out here Friday night for junior high group. It was great. John got up to preach. Right as he began to preach, the police helicopter started doing circles saying, we're looking for a man wearing a red shirt, white pants. Jesus has invited us to come out to where he is, to come out to experience everything that you could really want, not just in the life to come, but starting right now. But what it takes is a decision on your part, a decision that I'm going to embrace being an outsider. I love Jesus more than I love this world, more than I love the things of this world. The Bible says this. Jesus said that he who does not hate his brother, sister, father, mother, yes, even his own life, is not worthy to be his disciple. Look, what that means is some of us, I was talking to a family on the way in here tonight, and the woman in this family is facing that decision. She's facing rejection from her family because of her decision to follow Jesus. Some people are faced with that kind of a choice. It's going to cost you to follow Jesus, but I just want to say this. It is worth it. He is worth it. He is everything that you want. Every good thing is found in him. Would you please stand up?